for you today on this broadcast. The legal troubles are back to haunt Donald Trump in the election subversion case, as the Republican at this moment is battling with courtroom drama, while his political rival, Kamala Harris, appears to be catching up with him in the popularity polls. And in Bangladesh, a long-banned party is now tasting freedom again. How will the return of the Jamaat-e-Islami influence the country's political landscape? We'll be getting you all of these. But first, let's actually take a look at the top story from the United States. So with the American presidential polls nearly 2 months away now, the former American president and the Republican nominee Donald Trump is again caught in some fresh legal trouble. The prosecutors have issued revised charges against the Republican presidential nominee for his alleged attempts to interfere in the 2020 elections after he lost out to Joe Biden. The special counsel Jack Smith has filed the new indictment, and it lays out the same 4 criminal counts against Donald Trump. But what is interesting is that they now relate to his status as a political candidate rather than as a sitting president back then. Now, Trump is accused of conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, attempting to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. Now, Trump had previously pleaded not guilty to all of these charges. The move, of course, comes in response to a US Supreme Court ruling that says that presidents enjoy broad immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts while they're in office. However, it appears unlikely that the case filed against the Republican will reach the court before this year's US election that is slated to be held on the 5th of November. Now, Trump has come down pretty heavily over the new indictment against him. In a post on Truth Social, Trump has called the new indictment an effort to resurrect a dead witch hunt and to distract the American people from the election. He's also called it to be dismissed immediately.
I don't think that it changes anything legally. I think it's clearly an effort to try to do more election interference from Jack Smith. He should be ashamed of himself, and it's one of the reasons why we have to win, because he should not be anywhere near power.
The political significance of the fresh indictment adds another dimension to the ex-president's new face-off with the Democrat nominee Kamala Harris. The revised indictment will freshen the issue of Trump's alleged criminality and autocratic ambitions in the minds of the voters. Now, being indicted in the middle of a presidential campaign will be a disqualifying badge of shame for most candidates. And yet, Trump has used his criminal problems to revive his campaign before, especially during the Republican primary contest. His new indictment comes almost exactly a year after he showed up to be booked in an Atlanta prison. And also some more bad news for the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. The latest popularity polls appear to have closed the gap between Donald Trump and his political rival Kamala Harris. So let's take a look at as to how the numbers stack up at the moment. Now, according to the latest poll figures conducted over 3 days from the 23rd of August till the 25th, Kamala Harris appears to be gaining popularity and momentum and appears to be narrowing Donald Trump's lead as far as issues of economy and employment are concerned. Now, 43% of the voters sided with Donald Trump. Remember, 43% of the Americans still think that Trump is the man who can sort out the American economy and unemployment issue, while 40% of the Americans now prefer Kamala Harris. The difference now stands at a marginal 3% as compared to a substantial 11% lead that the Republican leader had back in July. However, these statistics do not take into consideration the latest political twist after independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. suspended his presidential campaign and decided to endorse Donald Trump. Now, Robert Kennedy Jr. has the backing of nearly about 7 to 8% of the registered American electorate, who will be key in swinging the political mandate, with neither side establishing a clear lead in any of the pre-election surveys. Now, in terms of issues on the ballot, the latest poll also reveals that economy remains the biggest concern for 26% of the voters, followed by 22% of the voters who picked political extremism and threats to democracy. Now, for 13% of the registered voters, immigration is in fact the most important issue this election season. All right, now to give us more perspective on this, we're being joined by Mr. John Blank, who's a former foreign policy advisor to President Joe Biden, and he's joining us on this broadcast. Mr. Blank, thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us on this broadcast. And let me in fact start off with this legal trouble that the Republican candidate, Donald Trump, is into. The indictment charge has been filed again, and this time around he's being referred to as a political candidate rather than as a former president. Do you think that's going to have any kind of an impact in terms of how the American public, of course, perceives Donald Trump?
Thank you for having me. I think that almost all American voters have already made up their mind about Donald Trump. They've seen what he did in his first term in office. They've seen what he has tried to do in refusing to leave office. They've seen his 2 impeachments. They've seen the evidence of his deep criminality, including his convictions. And I don't think it's going to really change a whole lot of minds either way.
You know, that's interesting because you say that the people have already made up their mind, and Donald Trump supporters would turn around and say that this is essentially a political witch hunt, and this is something that Donald Trump will try, use more to his advantage. But let's also talk about these pre-poll surveys, which are now showing that Kamala Harris appears to be closing the gap with Donald Trump on issues of economy and unemployment. The gap is now just 3%. But do you think, considering the baggage that Kamala Harris brings in as the current vice president, she can convince the American electorate that she can actually turn things around for the average American voter?
I think that's the key question. I think most Americans already know what they believe about Donald Trump. 40% will vote for him no matter what, somewhere in the 40s will vote for him no matter what, and somewhere in the 40s will vote against him no matter what. So it's really that relatively small group that are trying to decide, well, is Kamala Harris an acceptable alternative? And I think that she has every reason to be optimistic because the poll numbers have been trending in the right direction. But let's be clear, this will be an incredibly narrow margin right up until Election Day, no matter how it eventually turns out.
Now, this point of time, because you've also been a former foreign policy advisor to Joe Biden, this is also going to be a big question that will be playing on the minds of a lot of the Democrats. The foreign policy of Joe Biden, which will be the legacy that Kamala Harris will be taking into the presidential elections, how much do you think that will weigh in on the minds of an average Democrat? The war in Ukraine, the war in the Gaza Strip, the disastrous pullout from Afghanistan, all of these things are, of course, something that will go down as the legacy of Joe Biden, and by virtue of that, of Kamala Harris.
Yes, American voters tend not to make their presidential choices on the basis of foreign policy. As someone who is passionately devoted to foreign policy, I kind of wish they would, but the fact is they don't. However, this is going to be a margin of error election, so it is very much a real question. How much is President Biden's policy on Gaza going to hurt Kamala Harris? And I think particularly in states like Michigan, where there is a sector of the population, Arab Americans, citizens who are Muslim, who are progressive, a whole lot of others, where this really could provide the margin of success or of loss.
I think that's going to be very significant. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Jonah, for joining us and getting us that perspective there. All right, let's now shift our attention to what is happening at this moment in Bangladesh, whereas Bangladesh undergoes a massive transition in power dynamics. The interim government has lifted a ban on the country's Jamaat-e-Islami party. Now, earlier in the day, the Home Ministry issued a notification lifting the ban on the basis of no specific evidence against the party and its affiliates being involved in quote-unquote acts of terrorism and violence. The Jamaat-e-Islami is Bangladesh's largest Islamist party, which was banned by the ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina on the 1st of August, just 4 days before she eventually had to flee from the country. Now, the Sheikh Hasina regime has accused the Jamaat-e-Islami of being involved in nationwide violent protests. The opposition party, the BNP, that is the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, has welcomed the interim government's move to lift the ban on its once ally. The Jamaat-e-Islami was a key alliance partner of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party during its rule between 2001 and 2005. While there is some good news for Sheikh Hasina's political rivals on the one hand, there is fresh trouble for the deposed leader herself. Now, in the latest, 5 more murder cases being filed against Sheikh Hasina, taking the grand tally of cases to now 71. Just weeks ahead of the crucial assembly elections in India's Jammu and Kashmir, the political landscape has witnessed a fresh twist. The former members of the Jamaat-e-Islami party in India have started filing their nominations for the upcoming polls in the now Union territory. Jamaat-e-Islami was banned by the Ministry of Home Affairs in 2019 for 5 years, and the ban was recently extended for 5 more years. But its former members are now fighting as independent candidates. So how will this impact the elections in Jammu and Kashmir? Take a look at this report.
Jamaat-Islami has been against the electoral process in Jammu and Kashmir since the last 3 decades. But it seems that after the ban, the Jamaat leaders have decided to fight the upcoming assembly elections as independent candidates in the Kashmir Valley. Several former Jamaat leaders and members have started filing nominations in the upcoming elections. 3 Jamaat leaders filed the nomination for the first phase of assembly elections to be held on September 18. In South Kashmir's Kulgam district, Nazir Ahmed Butt, a former member of Jamaat-e-Islami, filed his nomination for Devsar Assembly constituency.
There was a lot of injustice here. Last year, my 2 nephews were arrested, and despite seeking help from many leaders, no one helped. At that time, I decided to serve the people. There was fear of rigging in the parliamentary elections, but it didn't happen, which gave me the courage to contest. That was the time I decided to fight, and I will make sure to win.
However, National Conference Party leader Umar Abdullah took a dig at Jamaat and said that till now, contesting elections was haram for the Jamaat-e-Islami, but now it's halal.
Till now, contesting elections was haram for the JEI, but now it's halal. If they are willing to contest polls, it's a welcome step. We wanted them to contest on their own symbol, but that didn't happen due to its ban.
Meanwhile, PDP President and former Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, Mehbooba Mufti, hit out at the Abdullahs and reacted to the comment made by Dr. Farooq Abdullah regarding the Jamaat behind-the-scenes support for the PDP.
It's not the first time that the National Conference and Congress have come together to fight against JEI. Remember what happened in 1987 during elections. The graveyards are a testimony to the horrors that unfolded back then.
Jammu and Kashmir is going to polls in 3 phases starting September 18th. The counting will be held on October 4. Jamaat leaders are now filing nominations as independent candidates as they tried to get the ban lifted, which didn't work. But now it seems that the support that Jamaat-e-Islami has in the Kashmir Valley might actually have an impact on the vote share of other political parties as well. With video journalist Feroz Idris Lone for WION World is One.
The South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has requested for a detailed report and briefing from the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Thembi Semilon, on allegations of her involvement in the VBS Bank corruption saga. This after media reports in fact linked the minister with the monies that allegedly were received from the now defunct VBS Bank. Now, according to reports, Semilon allegedly accepted an improper loan of about $28,000 from a company that was linked to the looting of the now defunct bank. Now, reports have also suggested that she used the money to purchase a coffee shop in a pretty affluent suburb, Sandton. At the time, Semilon was the mayor of Polokwane in the Limpopo province. VBS collapsed after more than $112 million was stolen by the executives and politicians over 3 years. Now, several political parties have called for Semilon to resign and are demanding for a swift probe into this matter. A leftist opposition party, the Economic Freedom Fighters Party, has called for Semilon's immediate resignation, now, despite some of its own leaders being alleged to have taken bribes as part of the scandal. The 51-year-old minister was appointed in the month of June after the historic African National Congress was forced to form a government of national unity with the DA and other smaller parties after May's election. The party had lost its absolute majority for the first time since democracy was, of course, ushered in 1994. High-ranking officials within the ANC have been involved in numerous graft scandals, including Ramaphosa and his deputy, as well as the country's former National Assembly Speaker. And our correspondent Calden Ongwu, of course, has sent us this report from Johannesburg as to what, of course, is happening in this case. Let's listen in.
Calls are growing for Justice Minister Thembi Simelane to resign over alleged links to the VBS Mutual Bank saga. The centrist Democratic Alliance said the allegations raise serious questions about the minister's integrity and her ability to fulfill the critical role of upholding justice. They said the minister must answer to Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Justice. Action SA have asked the public protector to urgently investigate the allegations and said that everyone involved in the looting of the VBS Bank needs to be prosecuted regardless of their political affiliation. Leftist opposition EFF also called for Simelane's immediate resignation, despite some of its own leaders also being investigated on the same matter. The minister is yet to provide evidence refuting the allegations. This is Calden Ongwu from Johannesburg, South Africa for WION World is One.
Now, Mexico has paused its ties with the United States and the Canadian embassies in the country. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador made the announcement after the United States and Canadian ambassadors criticized a proposed judicial reform in Mexico. Now, López Obrador, however, has clarified that the freeze with the embassies and it's not with the countries. The Mexican president is pushing a reform to elect judges by popular vote, which will include the election of the Supreme Court justices. Now, late on Monday, a committee in the lower house of Mexico's Congress passed the proposal, paving the way for it to be approved. Now, when the newly elected Congress takes office in September, however, Mexico's largest trade partner, the United States, has got some significant concerns about issues that are expected to crop up after the popular election of judges in Mexico. The American ambassador Ken Salazar expressed that those concerns in a diplomatic note on Tuesday, while Canada's ambassador to Mexico, Graham Clark, warned of investment concerns.
What a coincidence that the Canadian embassy also says something at the same time. Respectfully, with the Canadian government, it gives me second-hand embarrassment. They seem like a partner state. Together, they want to interfere in issues that only concern Mexicans. The relationship will continue, but hopefully, they will ratify that they will be respectful.
Pausar significa que vamos a darnos nuestro tiempo.
Mexico has said that the judicial reform will boost democracy in the country and will help fix a system that does not serve the public. In contrast, critics say that it will actually skew power in favor of the executive and will cut off the judges' careers and make the courts more susceptible to criminal influence altogether. Now, exactly about a month ago, Venezuela held its elections amidst intense global scrutiny and long simmering tensions within the country. Now, days after the highest judicial authority ratified the incumbent President Nicolas Maduro's re-election, the opposition continues to create a bit of an uproar over the contested mandate. In an online interview, the opposition leader, Maria Corina, has slammed Maduro for trying to instill fear and anger in the population through his repressive tactics. The leader has also raised speculation on the quote-unquote robust strategy that she says the opposition has to claim victory.
Everyone knows they intend to steal this. They haven't done it yet, they intend to. Because this isn't ready yet, on the contrary. What does Maduro have today? A very small group of high-ranking military, his control over magistrate and the Supreme Court and weapons, and obviously the way in which he is sowing fear.
But at the backdrop of all the hue and cry around the election results, it's business as usual for the re-elected President Nicolas Maduro. On Tuesday, the leader, of course, gave his cabinet a facelift as he announced the appointment of several key ministers. The president appointed his number two, Diosdado Cabello, as Venezuela's new interior minister. Now, Cabello is a hardline loyalist who will now oversee the country's police forces. The move has raised an alarm amongst the rights groups over massive crackdown on political opponents and activists in the country.
Today, I believe that Venezuela is heading towards a definitive peace. A peace with justice, a peace where people feel that those who have acted against the constitution and the law will receive justice in a timely, opportune and fair manner. Fair justice. So at your service, Chairman, here is a soldier of February 4th, a soldier of the revolution, a soldier of yours.
Maduro also ratified Vladimir Padrino Lopez as Defense Minister, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez as Oil Minister, Anabel Pereira Fernandez as the Minister of Finance, Pedro Tellechea as the Minister of Industries and Hector Obregon as the head of the state-owned company. State elections are approaching in the East German states of Saxony and Thuringia. And German far-right is banking on its renewable energy in its bid to secure its first electoral victory. Now, due to higher cost of transition to green energy along with the economic slowdown, opposition against the centre-left federal government's push towards renewable energy is actually rising. The far-right Alternative for Germany party has made renewable energy a centrepiece of its election campaign. Now, in a survey that was conducted by the Environment and Energy Ministry of Saxony, support for energy transition dropped to nearly 40% in 2023. Now, AfD, that is the Alternative for Germany party, has proposed some stringent measures to curb the expansion of wind energy. It has promised higher energy storage requirements for renewable projects and rolling back the rules that make certain proportions of land to be used for wind energy. Now, the far-right's push against renewable energy is resonating amongst the electorate. Alternative for Germany party is currently leading the polls with nearly about 30% support, far ahead of the centre-right Christian Democrats and the centre-left Social Democrats of Chancellor Olaf Scholz. The AfD party is also depending on the anti-migrant agenda, calling East Germany homeland rather than multiculturalism. And this has left the migrants living in East Germany extremely worried about the rising support for the AfD.
I'm actually very worried about the development of this political party. We are always talking about it, not only in East Germany, but especially in Thuringia. It's a big issue. My family is also worried because they read what's in the news. It's always very cruel what's in the news.
Meine Familie ist auch besorgt.
All right, let's also now take a quick look as to what is making news in the world of politics and elections. The trouble continues to mount for Indonesia's outgoing President Joko Widodo. The country's anti-graft agency will be questioning Widodo's youngest son to clarify his use of a private jet on a recent overseas trip, as well as who paid for the travel. Following the EU parliamentary elections in the month of June, Denmark has now nominated the centre-left minister Dan Jorgensen for the post on the new European Commission. Following his nomination, Jorgensen will now face a vetting and approval process by the newly elected lawmakers of the European Parliament before he can become a commissioner. It is currently not known as to which post he will be assigned to. Well, that's all the time we have in this edition of Race to Power. Thanks for watching.
Namaste. Hello friends. We did Dr. Subhash Chandra show, popularly known as DSC show, for 4 years from August 2014 to August 2018. 28 states of Bharat Of course, we reached out to all of you in 190 countries across the world. The show was very successful. Each episode was being watched by almost 25 million people every week. For past 6 years, the demand of the show has never died down. People write to us, people ask for the show to restart again. Hence, we are beginning the show once again on All Z Network, also on WION, which is the global network channel from India. Again, thank you for your love and affection. See you soon at Subhash Chandra Show.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at yoursarthi@such.org.in.
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at yowon.com.
The 81st edition of the Venice Film Festival kicks off. We tell you everything about the movies in competition this year. Find out why luxury brands are hiring Indian A-listers as their ambassadors. And know some lesser-known facts about Stree 2-star Rajkumar Rao. All this and much more with me, Isha Hanspal, at these times only on WION eClub.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Famine hit Sudan as peace talks fall short yet again. US brokered truce talks collapse after mediators failed to convince the military to come to the negotiation table. South Africa is committed to strengthening bilateral trade and investment with India, says its trade minister, amid launch of the India-South Africa Chamber of Commerce. And one of the success stories of world cricket, Namibia, a country with a population of just 2.6 million with limited facilities and only 9 cricket grounds. That's this week on